Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome to a special interview episode of Dads from the Crypt. My name is Jason. Joining me in the crypt today is makeup and effects legend, Alec Gillis. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jason. That's a great intro.
Yeah, I mean, we get John Kassir, to help you out a little bit. Magic happens.
I was going to ask about that voice. I was going to say, is that you? But it's the real
No,
deal.
that's the real deal. Well, initially we got him to do a cameo for us, and then since then he's been on the show multiple times. But
Fantastic.
and then you have some friends that can do some good music and editing, and stuff happens. But let's talk about you. I mean, you worked on, again, all the things I grew up watching, so this is a real honor. We're going to get into as much of it as we can. There's your list of credits is very extensive, but I like to go back and look to the beginning. Tell me, what did you grow up watching? What influenced you to get into this work?
Well, I was, excuse me, I had a kind of a similar experience to a lot of people. Hey, my voice gives out just at the beginning. And I grew up in Orange County. I could see the Disneyland fireworks from my bedroom window, at night. My mom used to drop my brother and I off when the park would open in the morning, and she'd pick us up when it closed, during the summertime. You'd run out of tickets back when they had ticket books. You'd run out of tickets in, 45 minutes. And then it was just, whatever, great moments with Mr. Lincoln over and over, and, eating giant dill pickles. But anyway, I think that had something to do with my love of animatronics, and just showmanship and, presentation and weird stuff. I was very fortunate to grow up there. But I also had like a lot of people who either have fond memories of watching things they're not supposed to watch with their dad or their bad uncle or whatever. My dad was a big fan of movies in general, but special effects movies in particular, because he had, when he was, he was an insurance salesman, and he used to sell insurance in Manhattan. So the 30 Rock building, the big NBC building, was his beat, so he would tell me stories of walking through that place and seeing production. And he had seen like special effects workshops in that building. And he actually sold an insurance policy to Dick Smith. So my dad had some knowledge of how things were done back then. And back then, when I was little, there was no information. I mean, we didn't have the easy access. There was no internet and all that stuff. So any little bit of information was fascinating to me. But he would let me watch, on TV. I remember watching the network premiere of Jason and the Argonauts. This would have been, probably shortly after the first Kennedy was assassinated. And it just blew my mind, the stop motion stuff. And I was really into Ray Harryhausen's work, and I was attracted to it on a visual and visceral level, but it engaged me intellectually, because I just had this thirst to discover how these things were done. So I've always been fascinated by how the illusions are created, and the artists behind them. Like when you realize that most of your favorite monster, movies when you were a kid, designs were designed by one person, that person being Ray Harryhausen, a bulb went off in my head, and I thought, oh wow, this is like a job, is it? Like they don't just appear out of the ether; they're created by talented grown-ups. Actually, this is how you could spend your life, so that sort of thing really influenced me.
And then how did you get into the business itself?
I had, through my teen years, I had kind of taken over my mom's garage in Santa Ana, and turned it into a little workshop, and I was doing stop motion models and stop motion films, and I was running around with my friends, shooting Super 8 movies and making masks and puppets and things like that. And by the time I think I was about 18, my sister was going to college in the theater arts department. I think it was Cal State LA, and she met a guy there named Walt Dodge who was working on a movie for Roger Corman. And the movie was Battle Beyond the Stars. And he came over and he saw all the stuff I was doing. And he was like, oh man, maybe I could get you an interview, a job interview. And I was like, okay. But I was very nervous because my portfolio was not, I didn't have a professional portfolio. I tried to, cobble together pictures and all that kind of stuff. So I've told this story a million times, so hopefully people aren't bored of it. But simultaneous to that, a high school art teacher that my girlfriend, who later became my wife, her high school art teacher had seen my work and was impressed with it and said, there's this other guy that my husband knows, and her husband, the art teacher's husband, taught oceanography at Cal State Fullerton. And she knew this guy that was doing these effects things, and he was about 5 or 6 years older than me. You should meet up with him. So I met up with James Cameron back when he was delivering school books for the Brea school district. So he was about 20 miles away, and we struck up a friendship. And I'd go to his house, and we would sculpt, and he was really into like visual effects. So he was building spaceship models and shooting them and stuff, and I was on the creature side and making molds and stuff. So our skills were complementary. So anyway, I thought, well, this guy's fantastic. He's got like a body of work. As an amateur, it was just like, it was crazy. So I asked, could I bring my friend along on the job interview, and he'd make me look good. So Jim and I went down and we met with Chuck Comiskey, who was the visual effects supervisor on Battle Beyond the Stars, and Robert and Dennis Skotak. And we sat in the room with them and had a great meeting for a couple of hours. And, I didn't say a whole lot, at the time. I think you can imagine that James Cameron did say a lot. And so eventually the job opened up, and Jim and I were both hired. And so I think I found my first pay stub from Roger Corman's New World Pictures from November of 1979. So I was 19 years old when I started. And it was really perfect timing because I had thought, what I wanted to do was go to USC Film School, get out of high school, go to USC Film School. But I got turned down. They declined to accept me to the USC Film School. I did get into their art department, but I thought, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to sit and paint canvases. And I want to make movies, So I was going to school, community college, and working. So I would kind of like, take time off if I could work, right? Obviously, Battle Beyond the Stars was like a 9-month stint. And so I just, stepped out of school for that period of time. And then when that film finished, by that time I had been accepted to UCLA Film School. And I went to UCLA Film School. And then I was going I would go for a quarter to school. And then I would take time off to work on some Roger Corman stuff or work for Corman at night, because I had a relationship with everybody over there. And then I think my final bit was I was working on Jaws 3D, and I was creating a miniature shark. It was about a 3-foot shark. We did a couple. I did 2 scales of shark, but they were all in the miniature. Again, for Chuck Comiskey, my boss, who had been at New World, and I came to the realization that I was leaving UCLA, at whatever noon. I scheduled all my classes to be in the morning so that I could get out to work on Jaws 3D starting at 1:00, and I'd work into the wee hours and then do it again. And I thought, why am I doing this? This is between Corman and this, these are the best film schools in the world.
Right.
So I dropped out of UCLA Film School with like one credit to go, and I kind of did it as a statement. And at the time, Cameron was telling me, "What are you going to film school for? It's a waste of time. You don't need to do that." And I was like, "Oh yeah, Mister, we'll see."
Did you ever go back and get that credit?
No. And you know what? UCLA has, well, I take it back. The film school has never asked me to come and do a presentation or talk to the students.
Wow.
It is as if I do not exist. And you know what the one credit was? A French class, a
French
language
class.
class. Yeah. So it was a language class. So I'm like, I don't really need this.
You can
But
you
I,
can submit your work as the in exchange for the credit.
yeah,
As your
maybe, I don't
thesis.
know. I could tell them I worked for Jean-Pierre Jeunet and picked up a couple of phrases.
That's really funny. I mean, so yeah. So speaking of, the best education is, experience. What can you say you learned from working with someone like Roger Corman?
Well, what was great about his organization was that it was all kind of like either people on their way up or people on their way down. So there were old timers there that had worked on movies in the 1950s and stuff, that you could pick their brains and you could see how they
Mhm.
navigated. And then there was all the enthusiasm of young people. Um, and I was lucky to have the Skotak brothers as my visual effects mentors because we were in the miniature building world. I wasn't doing so much of the creature stuff. I did work in the creature department on Galaxy of Terror, um, and so that expanded me there. But you got to do so many things at Roger Corman's. I was not only building miniatures. I don't know if you remember the Nell spaceship with the boobs that Cameron designed. So I worked on that with Jim, and then Cameron would kind of like move up the one rung up the ladder through his force of will and his abilities and all that. And I would sort of finish up whatever we were doing. We were a team, right? We were a unit. They called us Orange County, basically. They were like, put Orange County on it. And because we would drive in every day from Orange County, usually in my mom's Maverick, her yellow Maverick, until that broke. but
Mhm.
uh, but anyway, I just got to do so many things, like motion control, working with motion control, loading old school film cameras, the Mitchell cameras with the bipacks, the multiple magazines that you would use to create hold out mats and to composite spaceships into star fields, and I worked building sets, and Bill Paxton was there as a carpenter on that film. um, and you'd see some stars around like Klaus Kinski was in Android. I worked on that one, and they shot parts of Escape from New York there. So I'd walk past Snake Plissken, you know,
Mhm.
as these guys, and it was just really like great times, and it sort of gave me the understanding that scale of movie making is literally like what I was doing in my mom's garage with my friends in Super 8 cameras. It was just a different format and adults and more professional, and the results were better. Uh, but we were always sort of like black sheep. We were low budget. We were sort of outside. We were not the ILMs. We were not the Apogees, of the world. And we were always, you know, hungry to be in that league and to prove ourselves. So it developed a really lifelong love of low budget genre filmmaking for me. And I still love it.
That's awesome. Tell me about Jaws 3, because yeah, that just we're all like been going over the Jaws series this summer. And that is some of the most, like, I was watching, I noticed it's the most like underwater shots of the shark in most of
Yeah.
the Jaws. Like, you don't really see like a picture, or usually when it is, it's stock footage of a
Yeah.
shark that they took underwater. But yeah, there's a lot of miniature shark work. So
Yeah.
tell me about that process, especially with the 3D.
Well, we all know that Jaws 3D is the best of all the Jaws movies.
Yeah,
But so many
definitely.
people love it. It's a guilty pleasure for a lot of
It is,
people.
yes, this guilty pleasure is a very apt term.
Yeah, yeah, and it's charming. It's a fun. I have no complaints. Although my shark is the shark that is in that shot where it's coming towards the glass, and then
Uh,
it breaks the glass, and the shark stops, and everybody's, all that. That's my shark. There's a
oh,
story
cool.
behind that, but it does end up on like the number one worst visual effects shot in history. I've seen it pop up occasionally on
Mhm.
somebody's lists, which I'm very proud of because I contributed to it. But yeah, it was a big scale show. It was done, I believe it was Alan Landsberg Productions, and he was a TV guy. And they were using a electronic compositing system that was kind of new and cutting edge. And it was supposed to, like, because with 3D, you have two different images, slightly parallax shifted. And so you have twice the compositing to do. It's very labor intensive. So this electronic compositing system was the idea was that it was going to make it much more efficient and it wouldn't blow the budget. So our budget anyway it felt like it was a bit of an upgrade from our Corman budgets, but not that much. So we had a workshop in North Hollywood. There was a company called Private Stock Effects that Chuck Comiskey worked for, and he kind of brought the team from Corman onto that. And there was another couple of people on it that were kind of controversial folks who ran the place, and they ended up in some kind of legal conflict, right? And it had nothing to do with Chuck. He was outside of it, but it was the owners of the company that had some sort of dispute. And you'd have to talk to some other people who were more in the middle of it, because you got to remember I was, a 21-year-old kid or something at the time. So I'm picking up this, and I'm reading. Sometimes I'll read new information about it, and it's very interesting to me. But basically, what happened was the the company making the film stopped all the work because they had to get their movie done, right? And they took all of the contract away from Private Stock Effects and gave it to another company to finish. So my shark was a little bit complicated. It was a 3 foot long shark that had a mechanism in it that, could swim, look like it's swimming. It was all dry for wet, smoked rooms and stuff like that. And you could puppeteer it, right? And it had like levers. And then eventually we hooked the levers up to motors. So it was kind of running like on cams. So it was like you could sort of like plug it in and it would look like it was swimming. And then you had little radio control fin tips. It was really I was very proud of what we did. It was the main engineer on that was Dave Nelson, who I would later on bring over to Stan Winston when I started working for Stan Winston. And Dave did a lot of great stuff in those 80s and 90s animatronic thing. Anyway, so my nearest guess for why that shot looks so bad is that there's no puppeteering of the shark at all. It
Yeah.
just it's a drift. It's not even coming straight at the camera. It's kind of drifting sideways even. And I think what must have happened is the poor people who had to like finish the shots looked at this thing with cables coming out of it and motors over here, and they probably just went, screw it, we don't have time to figure this out, so let's just put it on a pedestal and we'll just
Yeah.
volley towards it. And as a result, when I saw it in the movie theater, I was absolutely mortified. And at that time in my life, I thought my career's over because I'm going to be attached to that shot that I really didn't have anything to do with, and they didn't know how to use my shark. But now in retrospect, I think it's part of the charm, and it's a good origin story.
Yeah, because the shark itself looked like as a thing, it looks fine, it looks good. But yeah,
Yeah,
the fact it looks like it's like on a skateboard or someone's just like pulling it forward doesn't
yeah.
really sell it.
I,
And it's
yeah, I wasn't there, so I
yeah,
confess, ignorance. And I am kind of filling in a lot of the blanks. There are people who have greater knowledge of it. I'd like to hear Well, maybe people have written about that. I wonder. I'd like to hear more of the details on it, actually. But I came away with a really strong relationship. Again, with that group from Roger Corman's, and that's ultimately the group of the primary group of people is what James Cameron came to for Aliens, and that's how we were all reunited for Aliens, kind of doing what we did at Roger Corman's.
Right. Yeah. So I've got some aliens questions, and one of the most interesting things I find, I'm a big fan of every alien movie. I'm a fan of. I enjoy, and it's interesting how the design of the xenomorph changes, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little bit less, for every film. Who ultimately drives the change for each film? Is it the studio, the director, production design? Or are you thinking of cool details to add? How does that happen?
Well, it comes from the director and it comes from the script. Like, I had the chance to work with Ridley Scott on his unproduced version of I Am Legend in the late 90s. So I got to pick his brain a little bit about Alien, which I did not work on. Cameron and I watched it, in our, before we were professionals in the business, we went to see this new movie and we were like blown away by it, right? So then 5 years later, Jim is directing the sequel, which is like a testament to his willpower and his talent. But Ridley Scott told me, I was asking him about the suit and how it was constructed, because H.R. Giger is an absolute game-changing genius in our business, and Ridley had seen his artwork as a lot of us had seen. I think some of it was in Playboy in the early 70s or the mid 70s. There was Brain Salad Surgery, the Emerson, Lake and Palmer album that I owned, when I was in middle school, and looking at it going, what? And there was the Debbie Harry art. So Ridley was familiar with this insane Swiss artist, and he basically said, I want that in the movie. So he had a really tight, close, collaborative working relationship with H.R. Giger. H.R. Giger was not himself a movie monster builder, right? So he was relying on English crew and the English technicians, sculptors and all that. And they did you could say nothing against the work that was in that film, but to hear it from an insider and literally from Ridley Scott, it was very interesting, because the suit itself, when we were working on Aliens, we got this kind of big coffin delivered to us. It looked like a big, plywood Wild West crate, and we opened it up and it had the xenomorph suit in it, or one of them, and there was a face hugger thrown in and a chest burster, and so that we could look at them to recreate them for Cameron. And what we saw was that the suit was made like out of liquid latex, so it was sort of like a Halloween mask, and it had cheesecloth reinforcement, and it was very stiff and not very flexible, which was really interesting to us, because we were like, at that time, Cameron was saying, look, this movie is going to have, we're going to build, I think it was 12 xenomorphs this time, and stuntmen have to wear these, and they have to move, because he was going to open it up, right? And you were going to see them crawling and all that. And he said, it can't be built like that. So some of the changes to the design were driven by those technical concerns. And Ridley Scott would later confirm to me, he said, yeah, it was like when you got Balaji Badejo into the outfit, he said, I realized that he couldn't move very much. He could do a little bit, but he couldn't move. And the script, the original Alien script, if you get a hold of that and read it, there's a scene where the alien, the xenomorph, is fighting people at the airlock and picking them up and throwing them around, and all, more like what you might see in Aliens. And Ridley had to go, I can't do that because the suit can't move in this fashion. So he said he had to reinvent the way he shot it. And he said it was the best thing for the movie. Those limitations were the best. So that's why it does those sort of balletic, slow moves, because it couldn't do fast, athletic stuff.
Yeah, which makes it like eerier, more otherworldly than just like
it's like
a creature just jumping at people.
I get chills, as I relay this to you, because I think, oh, thank God for the limitations of those practical effects, right?
Mhm.
And what was exciting for us when we got into Aliens, and again, we felt like, we are these upstart young kids working for Stan Winston. Um, and we've got to make something, not only guys in suits that could move and be dynamic, but a 20-foot tall queen alien that had to do what's in the script. And when Cameron writes it, that's exactly what he wants. So you're not going to really, you don't want to try to talk him out of the dynamics he's looking for. So those were some of, like, for instance, the lack of the clear dome on the xenomorph's head.
Right.
That was because Jim was very concerned that there would be a maintenance nightmare with all the stunts. If you had to drop and
Mhm.
and flail and bash against things, he just thought these, like, thin vacuum form plastic things are going to crack all over the place. We're not going to do them. And it was a last minute omission. Um, and Tom Woodruff Jr., who sculpted the head on Aliens, he wasn't planning on it. He planned on it having a dome. So the head, he, probably would have done something a little different if we had known. But Cameron just said, "Nah, I like it without the dome." And that was that kind of boldness that was great leadership, but also would kind of make you shit your pants, as a technical person. But that's why. And then furthermore, like, into the changes that we made for David Fincher or for Jean-Pierre Jeunet, they were reflective of the script. And
Mhm.
like by our logic for Alien 3, for instance, was, well, this xenomorph gestates inside a human being, and perhaps that's why we have seen them looking sort of like two arms and two legs.
Right.
Um, and so it takes a little bit of the characteristic of the host body on. And then we were very much into the idea that it was also chameleon-like in that it could reflect the surroundings. So when it's in the Nostromo, it's got lots of piping and little, like, on HR
Okay.
Giger's suit, you can see little, like, uh,
Tubes
car,
and yeah.
car parts. He actually
Yeah.
embedded car parts in, and you could read the Mercedes-Benz serial numbers on those car parts.
Oh my
So
god.
that to me was like, this makes sense. It's hiding, and Ridley
Mhm.
Scott made good use of that among the technology. So it's making itself look as part of the biomechanical thing, right? It's able to. So when Fincher, we read Fincher's script, and he described, well, these are going to be concrete. Then we were like, okay, so maybe we go more with sepias, less of
Mm.
blues and gunmetal colors, and more with sepias. And there was plenty of that in Giger's work at Necronomicon, those kind of sepia tones. But David didn't want to have the bagpipes, on the character. He didn't want those because he felt that those would be a clunky look, for when it's running. He wanted it very sleek. Um, we proposed that maybe those bagpipes could lay down, they could be there, because they serve a good artistic function and aesthetic. Aside from being a benchmark of the alien design, they do um, they do disguise the human form a bit, which is useful. But they were in the way a lot on Aliens when the guys would fall and be on their backs and stuff. They'd kind of go everywhere, bounce, stuff like that. So Fincher, he's the director. So we designed something for Alien 3 that didn't have those. Although I would, I don't know, maybe in my later years, I'll do designs of what just a new spin on those. But I'm very happy with that Alien 3 character. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't change too much about it. With Jean-Pierre Jeunet on Alien Resurrection, the whole thing was that in order to get to xenomorphs, Weyland-Yutani took blood from the scene of Alien 3, and that blood had traces of human DNA and alien DNA. So the look of those characters is softened.
Mm.
And if you're not, because they're part human, they've got human
Right.
beings in them. And when you see the clones, the succession of all the clones that are trying to clone a xenomorph but keep ending up going to the human side, then you understand that. but I know a lot of the fans who are purists, were, it was the early days of the internet, so we would get to hear directly from them about how we didn't understand anything about biomechanics and blah blah blah. But it is a xenomorph, and they do
Mhm.
change. And I think the new series Alien Earth explores that. I haven't seen it,
Yeah.
but I think it explores that more.
Yeah, I've seen the first two as of today. The first two episodes are out, and it's very interesting how much they're showing and what they're showing and everything, and some of the other creatures. One of
Mm-hmm.
the things I've always wanted to see, and this is kind of hinted at in like the toys that they came out with, is all like, what if the xenomorph was like released in like a zoo or a environment and got into all the different
Yeah,
creatures that
yeah,
like a snake or a gorilla or a
mhm,
horse,
yeah.
that's the kind of thing that like I would love one day to see.
That's
A
that, and
live
that was
action.
on our mind. What year would that have been? Those toys? Do you remember?
They were like early-ish 90s, I want to say, like around
Yeah,
Alien 3, probably mid
yeah, because that was the
beginner.
spirit of it at that time. And then the Dark
Mhm.
Horse comics came out,
Yes.
with
Yeah,
Alien
I read
versus
those.
and that was the spirit of it. Like, ooh, this is a big possible universe of mixes of things, and
Mhm.
and it has been explored to a degree in movies. But I'm always surprised when it comes to the Alien. Some of the hardcore fans about the pushback against, some of them seem to just want to do exactly what the original was. And of course I understand that, because it's always going to be the greatest because it was the first and it came out of Giger's brain. Like, that is not
Yeah.
there. That doesn't come from a person who's like, I'm a monster movie fan. That a person who has some deep psychological reactions to the world around them, so
Yeah. That's straight from the source. Um now for Alien Requiem, it's infamous for being too dark. That's just kind of what a lot of people that's kind of what it's oftentimes
AVP.
known for.
Yeah, yeah,
And then, but the thing is, obviously, as an artist, you want people to see your art, what you're working on, but you don't want them to see the seams in too much detail. There's like a certain level.
yeah.
So, but sometimes it goes too dark and you can't see enough. So, what do you think? How do you find that balance when, you know,
Well, I mean,
people are trying to
that
display?
again, when you ask the question of like who makes the decisions,
Mhm.
sometimes people think that we as the creature designers and builders are responsible for everything, including the sound
Well, yeah.
effects creatures. So I thank you for bringing that up, because it is a collaborative process, and our work happens in pre-production design and then in shooting the movie, right? Design and build, and then you shoot the movie. Post-production, I usually have very little to do with, unless we're doing some miniature effectsy stuff for, post production visual effects shots or something. So I'm often as surprised as anyone when I see the movie.
Mm,
In that case, with Alien versus Predator Requiem, I have never gotten an answer, a definitive answer as to why that movie's so dark. It was not shot that way. And it is not the kind of thing, like, for me. I It's a horror film and a sci-fi film, but the horror has to be there. So what you don't see is as scary as what you do see. But I guarantee you there were no seams and ugly stuff on those suits that had to be covered up. We pride ourselves, and you could walk those things in a
right.
lot of lighting environments. And if you saw Resurrection, that had a lot
Mhm.
more ambient light in there, and you got to really check them out and study that. I suspect that it was a last minute studio decision. Um, and maybe to try to make the film scarier. That might be because a lot of times the studios in they're not across the board, but there can be a panicky group think that happens in movies where they go, "Oh God, we got to," or some other movie comes out that's a big success and it's very dark, so they go, "Oh, we got to do that," and it's even against the director's wishes, and I would love to hear if Daniel Pearl, if you can ever get a hold of Daniel Pearl, who shot the movie, who's a super talented cinematographer, and all the dailies I saw had a really great look to it, and it was he did a spectacular job. The color grading of it is where it went
Mm,
like the worst projector bulb at a drive-in theater
yeah.
that, that you could possibly have. So I don't know. I'd be curious if there's anything out there that becomes definitive, but it didn't help the movie. We know that. I mean, it
Yeah.
just didn't.
There's plenty of, scene shot, like actual just pictures from the film that look fantastic, that are way better lit
Yeah,
than what's in the
yeah,
actual film. And and again, because the first Alien versus Predator didn't have the Pred alien in it, or until like that very last bit, and then they build up. So you'll have almost two whole movies building up to this creature. And I
yeah,
think when I see it, I think it's really cool. It looks really great.
yeah.
I just want to see more. But so tell me how you went about, doing the combination, the ultimate hybrid of those two.
Well, that was, we knew that there had been in the comic books, I think there had
Hmm.
been a Pred alien. And we thought it was a great idea. Like, yeah, like if it takes some of the DNA of a human being, you get the strong DNA of a predator, you're going to get more of that in the character. So we went through a lot of different design iterations. And it was it was a very fun process. Um, and there was not to, I don't want to keep bagging on the studios, but we are beholden to
they,
work.
they earned it.
Oh, well, I mean, it's like when you logically just go step by step in every meetings and you're talking about why this, how much of it, right? And I think what we came down to was it would be 80% alien
Mm,
and 20% predator. And that's just like, how do you measure that? Are you weighing
yeah.
how much mandibles? What are you doing? Right. Like, but it gives you a sort of an anchor point where you can go, okay. And then you can kind of tweak the design elements and stuff. And while we were sculpting, we had a design that was established and we were good to go. And while we were sculpting the full scale, and we had our friend Steve Wang, who is a phenomenal sculptor who, was we go back with the Stan Winston days, and Steve is just has a great design sense, and we had a great sculptural team on that. But it was looking great, and it looked just like our maquette design. Um, and the studio at some point said, "You know what? Could we like make some tweaks to this?" And we go like, "Yeah, it's clay, so we can make tweaks. What do you have in mind?" Well, we're feeling like a little bit. Can I just walk with you a little bit over here?
Oh, please.
Because rather than looking at me, we could look at this.
Oh, there it is.
So,
Amazing.
like I remember at some point the studio was feeling like this was kind of just going into a carapace, like an alien style carapace. Can we get a break in the sculpture along here that kind of looks like the predator's crest, right? And we said, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's your idea of what the 20% predator is different from mine, but we can do that. So we kind of incorporated that into it, keeping this all sort of in the alien geekery world. This was very important to us, to keep a dome there and to keep
Mhm.
the skull inside it, harkening back to what we loved about the original. And we had, I think we didn't have these reticulated. These were more like the smoother tubes of predator dreadlocks, and they kept coming back and asking for changes and changes. We said, "Yeah, could we like get all our changes in like order so that we can just, have time? We're sort of like on a deadline here." And it turned out that what had happened was when this maquette,
Mm,
this is the maquette for it, and we were changing it in the miniature to meet to match the request. This had been we had brought it over to the studio and to show all the producers, and it was in a producer's office. And one day they were giving a tour, and there was a 14-year-old kid among them. Right? Sorry for my bad camera work on my
no, it's
laptop.
This is
But
amazing.
there was a 14-year-old kid who looked at it and they said, "What do you think of this?" And he said, "Wow, cool alien." And the producers being kind of naturally panicky people said, "Wait a minute, did you say alien? Yeah, it's like an alien." And they go, "But do you see the predator in it?" "Oh yeah, sure, I see some predator in there too, but mostly alien." "Yes." And then they started panicking because one 14-year-old boy gave them an answer that they were a little uncomfortable with. So then it just turned into this whole, like, we have to change this, we have to, and in the last minute, I think we did a great job accommodating the changes. But it's that kind of thing that you have to deal with when you're working on a movie that has a lot of people weighing in on it, and it's a franchise by that point. Like, Ridley Scott didn't have to worry about that when he was establishing things, right? Nobody was going
Right.
like 20% this, and they weren't kvetching over it. But so we were like, oh my god, now this 14-year-old kid is now designing this movie for us, or an
Well, that's
interpretation of what he had said. Even
well,
it
that's
wasn't.
funny because they started off saying 80% alien. That's what he said. It looks like an alien.
That's why he said it. And we were like, wait a minute, he's saying exactly what we want. And they go,
Yeah.
no, no, no. But no, he saw it more as an alien and not enough as a predator. That's what we're worried about. It doesn't look like
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
pred alien afterwards. So the word predator is the first part of the net. Okay, guys. Let's go. Let's go. We got to, like, so in my job, I'm one who, like, because I worked for the great Stan Winston, who made us understand that we are psychologists as well as creature designers. And it's not our movie, right? It's not like I'm trying to work within the parameters that are established by the script, by the director, and those are the main things. But also producers, they if they control the money, they have a stake in it, and I have a contract with. So it's a balancing act. So sometimes, you can really, like, you can either blow up and get exhausted and say, "Fuck you guys, me," or you just go, "All right, let's take a deep breath," because there's a lot of ways to do great work. There's many ways to skin a cat, as I say. I don't know all of the ways of skinning cats because I don't skin cats. I want to make that clear right now. But there are ways to find success, and that's your job, is to find success. But back to your question of how do these changes come about? Sometimes it's like that. I do love it when I'm working just with the director, and it is the director that is making the calls, because then at least I know there's a purity of vision, and we'll find that. It's not a CC list of people who all have opinions and who, for whatever reason, will want to be obstinate or send you off in a goofy direction or what have you. Anyway, there's my
Um,
diatribe.
well, okay. While we're talking about the studios, so it seems like it fluctuates when the studios are promoting a movie and they start talking about, oh, we're doing all practical on this one. I mean, obviously nothing's ever all practical. You're doing all kinds of stuff. Um, how do you feel about studios using the effects as a marketing tool? Would you rather just let the effects talk to themselves, speak for themselves, and kind of let the audience discover? Are you kind of honored when they talk about, these groundbreaking miniatures, or
Well, you have to understand, like, I've been doing this for 46 years, so I have seen a lot of changes in the industry.
right?
And there was a time, right after Jurassic Park came out, and that was the kickoff of the digital revolution,
Mm-hmm.
where our techniques very quickly became kind of glorified prop making, and our stuff was old fashioned and literally dinosaurs, right? Like, and coupled with an explosion of the number and scale of digital effects companies, and their overheads were massive, and machines back in the SGI machines were like $1 million for what you can do on a laptop now. They had a huge monetary commitment to that. So digital effects companies through the 90s became ravenously mandated to just get as much of the job as they possibly could, and it's expensive work, right? So that sort of put us in the back seat, begging for table scraps, and we would say, but you have it, it roots the look of it anchors the look of your effects in the movie, and then your digital artists have something to shoot for, and you get responses like, yeah, thank you very much, George Millier, very quaint rubber guy, and those attitudes were out there, and
Yeah.
so now when I see people, the pendulum has swung back, and people do appreciate real stuff, and a lot of it is because the audiences have grown up going, what happened? We were on a really good trajectory through the 80s and into the early 90s, and then we got the Scorpion King, and then we get, how did we and then digital effects started creeping into horror, and blood started being done digitally, and like what happened? So the audience knew. The audience, like just the average Joe that I would talk to about effects in the 90s would be like, what's up with digital? Now it got a lot better. The digital effects got a lot better, and I don't want to misconstrue that digital effects are every bit as artistic as practical effects. It's just that so much more of the work is done for you by nature when you do practical effects.
Yeah.
Lights, dripping, liquid fluids, all that kind of stuff. Dynamics, physics are kind of taken care of in a lot of ways. It can also, on the downside, look like clunky guy in a suit or crinkly rubber or what have you, or the inability to leap from 30 feet, without wire work. But there's wire work, right? Like you can put them on a wire harness. So where we are now, I think, is a really nice amalgam of the techniques, digital and practical. And we're seeing some really great examples. And now we have directors who are going to bat for it. They're not seduced by the new hot sizzle technology. You still have resistance to practical at the studio level. And the reason for that is they're afraid that once they get their movie cut together, they got to redo scenes. And when they redo scenes, because it's not things, nothing to do with the effects, it's just the movie needs a new ending or whatever, what have you. I have theories about why that's happening lately, but they're afraid that they're just going to have to scrap all the work that was done. So they may as well not pay for anything in pre-production and just let the edit happen, and then they can plug more CGI in. And the CGI artists don't like that because it's just too much work. They'll be doing 9,000 shots in a movie, and that's why those credit lists are so huge, because it takes so many people to do those digital effects. And ultimately, now I think I have a lot more folks in the digital world who are saying, please, can we do practical? Can we get it in the camera so that there's less for us to do, because we want to stay married. We don't want to have divorces and heart attacks and all that kind of shit. And I totally get it. So your question was, how do I feel about them using the effects as a marketing tool? I think it's great generally. I think it's great for finally the studios are waking up and listening to fans and seeing the value of practical effects, and they can put the shots in their before the movie's done. You can have some BTS stuff. You can show people, in real sets and wearing real costumes and cool stuff happening. And otherwise, you're showing incomplete digital shots in your trailers. So I'm okay with it, but I know that there's controversy because sometimes the studios have apparently been faking practical shots and lying to the audience. I don't like that. I think people are smart. People are too smart. You don't.
It's like what you said about the word that jumped out to me was anchor, because when there's something at least practical, your brain can anchor onto it as something that exists in the real world, where even a really good CG shot, you still know that there's nothing tangible to it.
Yeah.
Where even a so-so practical shot, it's exists in reality.
It exists. And like I said, a lot of that works done for you. And there's a lot of great practical work. I mean, look at how groundbreaking Neil Blomkamp's work was in District 9, right? Like That was phenomenal stuff. He knew what to do, how to avoid the pitfalls of CGI, So it is out there. It's just very costly, and it isn't necessarily. It can look like beautiful artwork, but it doesn't look real. I had a producer some years ago tell me, we're not going to do a practical creature in this movie because we've done some research and video games are a much bigger industry than movies. So we want to get the video game aesthetic into our movie.
Oh
And I'm like,
no.
you don't know what the audience, we have compartmentalized minds. The video
Yeah.
game is its own medium.
Well, it's interactive.
It's interactive, and it doesn't require the same suspension of disbelief that a movie does. You want to be guided by a storyteller who's not
That's
shoveling shitty images out at you.
that's
But anyway,
crazy.
that's
But,
listen to
well,
me.
and that kind of leads me to my next question. One of my favorite effects movies is Starship Troopers because it has amazing practical. They're still using models to a degree, but there's really cool CG like wide shots and things. So
Yeah.
tell me about working on that movie, and Phil Tippett was on his team were doing that. So how you were able to marry the practical and the digital.
Well, I give all credit to Phil Tippett and Craig Hayes, his designer, because they were working on that movie, trying to get it off the ground for 2 years before we came on to it as practical effects, as creature guys. So their designs were done, and they designed the creatures to work best as digital creatures, right? So they were, hard shell mostly. They were bilaterally symmetrical. So they did it because they knew they had to do millions of bugs, right? So they were designing within the parameters of that pipeline, that workflow. And the designs they came up with were really cool. They looked great. So, and then Phil Tippett is, being a master who has been around in the practical world for a long time before there was even any digital. He understands movie making, and he understands what the audience will see and what doesn't matter. So I could say to him, like, hey, look, here's the model of your warrior bug. It has a really tiny waist. There's a tiny ball joint here, and it looks cool, but I've got to pick up a stuntman in its jaws, and the leverage out there is going to mean that this ball is too small. It's going to break. We know that, right? We could just do math and find that out. It's an engineering question. And then Phil will go, oh, just make it as big as you need. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Phil. Because the way and he didn't have to change his models at all. They still have tinier balls. I got big balls. And that's the difference between practical and digital. No, I'm kidding. So we did it. We built it that way. And it worked. And, a lot of people who come strictly through the digital world who don't really understand filmmaking as well as a Phil Tippett, they will angst over a lack of continuity. But when they cut to yours, it's going to look like a different. No, it's not, because you're focused on the head. A lot of the shots are going to be handheld that we're going to be shooting, right? And you're in with a wide angle lens close to them versus being a little bit back for the action for the digital shots. It's going to work. And Phil just instinctively knew it. And so that I'm really grateful to him, and I'm grateful because he was the one that selected us for the job, and we did some of our biggest creatures, and it was just an amazing adventure out in the deserts of Wyoming and South Dakota. It was like, and the second unit alone on that movie was twice as big as most feature films I've worked on. Yeah.
All right. Now, as a kid, I was obsessed with Mortal Kombat. I spent many hours, and I dragged my father to take me to see that movie. And then getting to see the man, Goro, on the screen was amazing. Tell me about translating a digital iconic. I know it's a claymation originally in the video game character to, real life and movie usable. And of course, for those watching YouTube, there he is. That's amazing.
This is all I have of him anymore. I don't have the, he kind of rotted away.
Yeah.
That's a fun piece we made, a tribute piece for Goro. That's we scanned my original sculpture of the head, and
Hmm.
then created this in 3D. So it's a big print. Check out the base though. Can you see that his ponytail is
Yeah.
what holds him
Oh,
up?
that's cool. The ponytail's the base. That's really fun.
Anyway, yeah. So that was this was a massive challenge. This is one of the most cortisol-filled jobs we've ever done. So Tom Woodruff and I, my previous company, Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated, which lasted for 34 years and is most of the work that we're talking about now. Studio Gillis is my new solo effort, and that's only been around for the last 3 years or so. But with Mortal Kombat, we had a producer who came to us and basically said, I want to do like a telemetry suit, and I want a man in a suit because I want a human performance, and the upper arms will be mechanical, the head will be mechanical. And we're like, this is awesome. This sounds like, how often does a producer come to you with some knowledge and say, this is how we want to do this? And it's like a huge challenge. It was not easy. It's one of the most difficult jobs we've done because I think we only had about 3 months to do it. And we would have liked to have had 6 months. And in that time, we built 2 hero mechanicals, one that was totally self-contained. All the motors were internal. The other one had a big bundle of cables that came out of under his loincloth and went to a motor box that was using high-speed motors and to get the smooth resolution of movement. But in both cases, they were controlled by a puppeteer wearing a telemetry suit off screen. And the face was a lot of it was live performance, but there's also some pre-programming of lip movement and dialogue and stuff. So it was very, very cumbersome. And Tom Woodruff was inside the suit, and he had played in he was the alien in Alien, and he was just an amazing suit performer. And also, the co-owner of our company. So like, who better to do that? You're not going to have him complaining that it's too heavy or that, because it's his dream job. But it was we had to design around the parameters of a human being and try not to make it too heavy so that we could, get a day's work in without him being totally exhausted. But yeah, and then the job was, I think, we looked at the comic book, and you can see that Goro is pretty stylized in the comic books, but so are the human characters. So they sort of feel like they're of that world. So our goal was to pull him into more realism, so that his face looked, more proportionally like a real person, his body and all that kind of stuff, despite the fact that he had 4 arms. So we were trying to do something that kind of messed with your brain, that wasn't screaming that it was an effect, but maybe it was more of a character. And then you just sort of, do your best in the 3 months that you've got and let the chips fall where they fall.
Wow. I I think it looks fantastic, and that movie still holds up. And of course, Dad's from the Crypt. We've started off as a Tales from the Crypt podcast, and you got to work on 2 episodes, at least I could find. Um, Tell me about those 2. So you worked on Corman's Calamity, which had those big kind of monster suits that were really
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. And Brother's Keeper, right?
And Brothers Keeper with the conjoined twins.
Yes, that's right. So 2 very different jobs. Corman's Calamity was the one with the washing machine, the creature that comes out of the washing machine. Yeah. So very little time and not a lot of money on those shows. So you're just working around the clock, and they were bigger and more fun. And we're huge Rob Bottin fans. And a lot of what we were doing in our Stan Winston days, and then, even in my career in general, is that, we're going for a certain amount of realism. But sometimes you want to cut loose and just do something fun, something that's more imaginative. And so that was the idea there, was just like big, bold, brassy. The amphibian character that comes out of out of the washing machine. We had to make that as cheap as we could. So that was kind of like we cut muscles out of cushion foam, like you get it at Home Depot, sheets of it. It was almost like a cosplay approach, right? Direct construction. And we skinned it, we glued it onto a unitard. We skinned it with latex sheet and all that kind of stuff. And it was so hot, and Tom just filled it with sweat. We were like, thank God we're scheduled one day of shooting on this. And thank God it was only one day, because we literally had to cut him out of the suit. We had to cut right up the back of the arms and the legs to peel this soaking wet thing that was destructing after a 14-hour shoot. And we're like, God, I hope they don't call us for pickups, because this suit does not exist anymore. And
I don't think they pick up on Tales from the Crypt. It's so quick.
No, probably not. And then Tom was also played I can't remember the female character, the mother-in-law or something, was it? Or,
I think it's the wife.
Oh, the wife, yeah. So it was just all like outrageous fun, It was a blast. And then the other one, the conjoined twins, that was more about the appliances. So that was the other direction, right? Like, we got to do this believably. We got to like get the two guys in and mold them and put their hips together. And it was one of the weirdest makeup jobs that applications I've been involved with, because you got two naked dudes standing there, and you're gluing, and you're tucking the edge of the conjoining mass into their butt cracks, just stretch it right into the butt cracks. And of course I think they were both stand-up comedians. So they're just like giving you hell the whole time, and you start at like 4 a.m. and you're like, God damn it, what kind of career choice have I chosen here? I got to like glue these things up. But they were really good. The guys were really good. I can't remember. I think they cut it in half, don't they? We had some bleeding effects. I haven't seen it. I think I saw it once when it was on TV, and I haven't seen it since then. But yeah, good times.
Yeah, great stuff. Again, I'm also a huge Tremors fan, which you helped design the original. So tell me about how did they describe it to you, and then how did you kind of make that reality? Because it's a very abstract, it's a very kind of, for lack of a better word, alien thing to develop.
Yeah, the script had very little description of the graboids. There was one part that said the head opens like a grotesque flower, and that was kind of an anchor point there. It's a lot like designing these creatures is kind of like being an actor. You're looking for clues as to what this thing is, because you got to create it entirely, right? So Tom and I would meet with Ron Underwood, Steve Wilson, and Brent Maddock, the director and writers, and we would meet mostly at a restaurant. We were meeting at the Marie Callender's in Toluca Lake. They had these big round tables, and we'd sit around. We'd bring all our nature books there, and we'd eat hash browns and drink coffee and stuff, and spend hours with those guys going through it and talking about the biology of it. I'm a huge fan of biology and sort of scientific accuracy. And if you recall in the movie, there were 3 different possible explanations of where these things came from. They could be nuclear radiation, outer space, or prehistoric. So we had to kind of make something that looked like it could fit into any of those categories if you whichever one the audience preferred. So I happen to have here, the reason I walked over here, this drawing is the first drawing. I did this one, and this was the first one that they were like, ooh, that's cool. And that started the process guiding the direction of it. You can see it's a lot more kind of snake-like in its posture than we ended up with. But this was it kind of led to this. This was another sketch I did. I am a terrible laptop cinematographer. That's another. That's just sort of like 3 phases of it. Open partly open, closed. You can see, I was really interested in mandibles and the complexity of the head. The top of the head is a complete lift of a snapping turtle. I've always loved snapping turtles because they look like they have like it looks like pliers to me, the way they bite, and the shell, the broken shell is more what the teeth are rather than like big fangy, boogity monster teeth. So that felt to me, and then little tiny like grabby teeth on the inside of the gullet. This is let me move this around a little here. See if this is working for you. Okay, you see the top image. You can see it had a foreskin at one point, and that was going to peel back to reveal the head because we were very interested in revealing the creature step by step. Like first iteration that you see of it, you think it's just like snake creatures, but those are the tongues, those are the tentacle tongues, right? And those had to look like they could be their own creature, and not just a tongue. So they look like, they themselves have their mouths with mouths, and little grappling hooks on them and so on. And then we thought, well, what if it had like this weird like sheath over it, and that pulled back, revealing the head. And that goes back to kind of what Cameron did with the Queen Alien, right? Like when the Queen Alien's head was pulled back in and it pushes out, we were going for that kind of thing. But Gail Ann Hurd, who's very astute, had a somewhat different point of view, and she said, "We're not doing this foreskin, guys." We're like, "No?" But she says, "No, I'm not making a movie about giant dicks chasing people around in the desert." And I said, "Point taken." So anyway, this is the final look, and this was done. This is the quarter scale version of the worm. So we made this particular wall piece out of the molds of the quarter scale, but you can kind of see some of the detail. And I was very proud of the texturing of the like this jagged. God, I really am terrible with this. Oh, here, where am I going? Yeah. So like these jaggedy parts are kind of like broken off. Like you figure they kind of like sharks have rows of teeth. This, it would break off and a new one would grow, but it was to look kind of almost like obsidian a little bit. And you have like some negative space with the bones, on the side of see that little hollow up where it joins the cheek. And there's the snapping turtle head with kind of like, and we went for the black because it just looks badass, instead of a human bone look or a mammal bone color, because it wasn't supposed to be like bone had been, flesh had been peeled off. It needed to look like it was a protective carapace. Yeah. And that was also meant to make it look a little more alien, right? So that it didn't look like a creature from, from Earth, maybe. But anyway.
Wow. All right. I know we're short on time. I have two questions that just to answer real quick. What's your favorite creature you've created? First one that comes to your head.
Gosh, see, so my I'm not lining this up. I just don't think we haven't seen this guy as much in the background. So I'm favoring that. That's not a way of answering the question. I associate my good vibes towards creatures not only as the final result of the film, but the process of making it, right? Like Goro probably wouldn't be up on the top of my favorite because it was so grueling and torturous to do that and not particularly fun. Tremors was a blast. Pumpkinhead, do you remember Pumpkinhead?
Yeah. Totally.
My mentor Stan Winston, that was his directorial debut, and there's my casting.
There it is.
Head that I designed and sculpted for that. Anyway, that was my part of that. But yeah, what else? I mean, Aliens was a blast, and this is the prey predator right there. Dan Trachtenberg is a fantastic director. So I don't know, man. It's really, I would have to like, I don't know. Maybe I
Mhm.
just leave it up to other people to
Okay.
decide. I like doing original stuff. I guess like I go back to Tremors because that feels like more of me in the design of those graboids.
Mm.
It was not an inherited franchise. I feel like with the franchises, the Predator and the Aliens were sort of caretakers. We're the guys doing it right now. Other people will do it. Other people have done it. So something that's me, I guess. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you. Maybe we
Okay.
could do this again when I'm actually retired, and then. And Lance Henriksen would say, when he was asked, "What's your favorite role?" he'd say, "The next one."
Right. All right. And then finally, what advice would you give an aspiring effects artist that wants to break into the industry?
This is a really unprecedented time, and it's difficult for me to give advice like I used to be able to sort of say, hone your skills, don't ignore the traditional arts, because the traditional arts are a foundation for all other art, but also learn the new techniques, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't know, like in Los Angeles, like I was very fortunate that this was a hub, right? Um, Things are dying here and they may never come back, but that opens up things for, if you've got listeners in Spain and all that. So maybe there are some other opportunities elsewhere. So that's only, but there's the AI of it, right? Like and I don't know, I gotta believe that people are still going to want not just organic OI, organic intelligence, um, not just that, but they're going to want to talk about the experience, like you and I are talking about the
Mhm.
experience. What was the experience for me as an artist to work with Paul Verhoeven? What's it like to get yelled at by Paul Verhoeven in the middle of a desert? Stuff like that, which is like that's part of the life adventure of it that I think we all love. We watch a movie and we go, people made this. They sweat blood and tears, and there were arguments and passion. That's a story about human endeavor. And AI doesn't give you that. Are you going to talk about prompts? Is that what we get a podcast where people say, what prompts did you use? I don't know. AI is really powerful. It gives some really outrageous and fun results. So it's hard for me. I think just pursue your art and your passions and don't get depressed like I'm laying a bunch of negativity on
No, you
because
don't come like this.
you're not doing it. I didn't get into it because I thought I'd get famous or rich. I got into it because I just had to do it, because I just wanted to do it. It was so fascinating to me, and it has been fascinating. The way we're doing things now might be coming to an end, but maybe we can kind of guide it into something newer and cooler. You can make movies now with your phone. You can do all that shit on your own now. I wasn't able to do that coming up. I could make a Super 8 thing, but it didn't look like, it could compete with a Star Wars movie. Anyway, sorry for the rushed, that's my encapsulated
No,
uh,
that's
little depressive moment for
no,
you.
that's authentic. That's what we crave. Um, Alec, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Where can people follow you? Do you have any projects coming up you want to shout out?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Alec_Gillis. I also have a miniature effects company with some really talented people that are doing amazing stuff. We did miniature spaceships for Alien Romulus. We did the miniature spaceship in Fantastic Four. And it's
Hmm.
also my production company where we are intending to make more low budget genre films and hopefully release them directly to the fans of what we do, as opposed to going through the traditional steps that are all falling apart anyway. But that company is called Pro Machina, so that's on. You can follow me, and then you can find them. But it's PROMACHINA, and they're on Instagram as well. And if you get a chance to watch Wellwood, that's our film that's out now. You can purchase it on Amazon. It's a really awesome It's a small movie, indie horror sci-fi with some great practical creature effects, lots of other effects in it. Please watch that. Keep the art alive. And then, I don't know, I maybe come back and bug you to help me at some point. I don't know. I don't know if I do another crowdfunding thing or what, but I'm feeling like we are an underserved community. And I feel like, we need to be putting out independent genre feature films that go direct to people and not through the labyrinthine, soul-crushing process of normal movie making.
No, I completely support that. Anything I can do to help, I am there.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that wraps everything up. I appreciate everyone for listening. I would really appreciate it if people give us a rating and review on iTunes, a rating on Spotify, like and subscribe on YouTube, and follow us at Dads from the Crypt Talk on TikTok. With that, I thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.